Good afternoon, everybody. We are now live, and we are delighted that so many people are planning to join us for this Belbin webinar, where we're talking at Love Collaborating, Hate Meetings. We've had quite a response, actually. Quite a few people have signed up, and I think that perhaps is an indication of just how we feel about meetings. And I think that the title of this, chosen by Carrie, really does sum up, doesn't it? We want to collaborate, but my goodness, is meetings the best way for it? So as you all join, we'll be starting in about a minute and a half, but I thought I'd give you an opportunity to get yourself settled, get yourself a cup of tea, get your pen and paper ready. Turn off all of those distractions and get ready to join us. So as you are coming in, please do introduce yourself. There is a comments box and tell us where you're from. My name's Jo Keeler. I'm from Belbin. And we are joining you from a very beautifully sunny, bright, blue sky day in Cambridge. So please let us know where you're joining us from. I can see, hello, Gary, lovely to see you from a sunny but cold, just it's a bit nippy. Lyme Regis in Dorset. Oh, hello, Colin. Lovely to see you. I haven't spoken to you for ages. You're also blue skies near Nottingham. Hello, David. You're from a cold Alsace. Christmas markets and mulled wine. Oh, yes, exactly. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? Tamaris from a chilly and sunny Wiltshire. Wonderful. So please do use the chat as we go through, just for some thoughts or some questions you may want to ask at some point, or just to talk amongst yourselves. It's quite nice. We have quite a community, and it is great to see the conversations going. Oh, hi, Grant. Lovely to see you from a sunny Colchester. Wonderful. And hello, Harriet. She's joining us from the other room. So she's also in Cambridge. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. We're going to get started. Otherwise, we'll never get finished. So officially, welcome to this Belbin webinar. Love Collaborating, Hate Meetings. We're joined by the wonderful Carrie Goucher, who will be talking to us all about her experience of meetings and how we can perhaps make them not just more enjoyable, but actually more useful going forward. A little bit of introduction first. My name is Jo Keeler. I'm the Managing Director here at Belbin. For those of you who are less familiar with Belbin and what we do, is that we help teams work better together. How do we do that? Well, via the language of Belbin team roles, understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, and be able to use that wonderful language of Belbin to be able to really enhance collaboration and communication within teams. We do this via the Belbin reports when people fill in the questionnaires, and we help people to be able to implement Belbin within their organisations by offering the Belbin accreditation course, so you too can become the true Belbin experts. This is being recorded, and so please do relax and enjoy rather than thinking you have to scribble everything down. An email will be out later this afternoon, not just with the recording, but with links to newsletters and articles and anything else that we cover during this time. And again, please use the chat as and when. So without further ado, I must introduce Carrie. Now, Carrie helps transform meetings and meeting culture. She has redesigned how we meet for the collaborative era, crafting meetings that are honest, focused, supporting, and energizing. Now, Carrie has a PhD in meetings and has created an evidence-based framework for what underpins meeting success and is trusted by big brands and government agencies across the world. We are so delighted to have a Teams expert with us here today. So I would just like to say over to you, Carrie. We're really looking forward to this.
Oh, thank you so much, and the warmest of hellos from also very sunny Norfolk today here in the UK. My name is Carrie Goucher, and my whole job is to help organisations shift out of ways of thinking and working and collaborating that we inherited from the industrial era and into ways of working together that are a match for the knowledge era. Well, the world is complex, we work globally, and all the things that we know about leadership and group psychology, we start to translate those into really powerful ways of working. And I would think most people on this call have spent a lot of time and heartbeats in pretty mediocre meetings. So my job is to go into organisations with full of 10 out of 10 people who are spending their time in 5 out of 10 meetings, or sometimes even 2 out of 10 meetings. And I see leaders today spend so much money and focus on so many aspects of productivity and quality and profitability. And often this includes a really sophisticated view of culture, but they're doing almost nothing about the technology that such a large amount of their annual budget goes into, which is meetings. So almost every company I work with has the same problem. So they think they're building a breakthrough service or a breakthrough product, but they're actually a meeting company that builds tech products on the side. So today I want to know, what problem did you come here to solve? So you may be part of an organisation, have come to get some ideas very specifically for your organisation. You may be a consultant or somebody independent who supports organisations on their effectiveness and their culture, and you want to learn how that relates to meetings. But I would love to know what my job is today and what you would most love to get out of it. So drop in the chat the thing you are not leaving until you find out how to.
Okay. We'll just there's always a slight time delay, Carrie,
Yes,
so
I
don't
can see
worry
frantic
about
typing.
that. And everybody's typing, everybody's thinking. I know that we've had good chats here in the Belbin office, and what we're here to come today is we know some of the theory, we understand we're different, we've got the Belbin overlay, but how to use that in a practical sense. I think sometimes there is a chasm, isn't there, between the theory and how do we actually implement that. So we're looking for lots of practical tips and ideas, because I'd like to think that here at Belbin we're great at meetings, but we're not. Okay, so Bex Williams says to get a consensus and actions. Also know when not, that's a good one, when not to have a meeting.
We're definitely going to do that. We're going to do, I see so many interesting things. How to keep meetings short, how to follow up well, how to check understanding, sharing information rather than decision making could be done in that way. Yeah. Very, very sophisticated level of thinking already I can see coming through. So what we will do today is I'm going to unpack a few concepts that I think you will intuitively understand, but perhaps I can put some language to them for you and have you understand what is sitting behind this phenomenon we call meetings. So when I sat down in the Department of Engineering at the University of Cambridge, PhD, day one. Okay, let's go. And I started to read in depth some of the literature that had already been written about meetings. And I was really shocked to see how surface level so much of it was. So of course we have to start somewhere. Meeting science is not a very well evolved discipline yet. But what I found that most of the studies looked at was things like how long should meetings be, how many people should be in them, what are the factors that make meetings work or not work, and it was all fairly kind of surface level. So part of my study over that 3 years and beyond has been to look under the surface. So let's go under the surface now. Once we've done that, I'm then going to show you 5 principles, the kind of mechanisms that underpin great meetings and help us manage meeting bloat. And I'll show you the simplest technique I know for each one to use it and give you some ideas for some more advanced techniques. So you can really get a sense of what does a good meeting look like in the knowledge era. So firstly, meetings are a modern paradox. So we have this challenge around collaboration. We need enough time to solve problems alone, and we also need time to solve problems together. But what's happened is that in our diary, it tends to look like this one on the right. So we've got meetings blocked out on the hour, every hour, all the day. That's a kind of classic knowledge worker diary. But for many of the people creating value in organizations, they're actually makers. This one here on the left, and they need big blocks of uninterrupted time to get to sufficient depth to do the quality of work, to write code, design things, develop ideas, whatever it is. So we have this clash between the uninterrupted time we need to do the work, and then the surface time we need to come up to the air and connect with other people and show our work and critique other people's work and align our work. And the thing is, because meetings occupy hard architecture in the diary, what we end up doing is we have a diary full of meetings, and all that deep work, when does that get done? Does anybody have a diary like the one on the left? All that deep work gets done, squeezed in between meetings, evenings, weekends, and so on. So we've got a fundamental problem. We wonder why in organizations milestones slip, we don't get ship product when we need to, we have issues with customer service. We wonder why the work isn't getting done at the pace and quality we need when we're spending so much time talking about it in meetings. And of course, there's loads of advice on meetings. So if I were to do a little poll and say, what makes a good meeting? I'm sure we'd come up with a list like this. So things like use an agenda, we need to start and finish on time, make sure everybody speaks, write down actions, etc. Like, how hard can it be to run a good meeting? And that's really what a lot of the literature around meetings studies. The thing is, firstly, we often don't do these things. So for whatever reason, a bit like, I don't know, doing 100 press-ups a day or eating 5 fruit and veg a day, it's one of the things we know we should do, but it just doesn't creep up high enough up the agenda, as it were. But even if we did, these surface level things, it still wouldn't be enough to handle the complexity that meetings bring, the very different personalities that arrive together, the kind of level of healthy disagreement that we need, all the different political agendas, the pressure, etc. Meetings are a container for everything that is challenging and dysfunctional in organizations. So just simply having an agenda written down on a piece of paper often isn't enough. Why? Because meeting behaviors are driven by our prehistoric Stone Age brain. So we spent 95% of our human existence not in meeting rooms or on Zoom calls, but where? In hunter-gatherer tribes. And in those tribes, to be outside of the tribe is dangerous. So without being safe and enclosed and valuable within the tribe, you will die of exposure, you'll be eaten by a tiger, but you also need to be in the tribe to access mates, to develop skills, access resources, all that kind of thing. So from that healthy tribal behavior came specialization, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, etc., etc. And because we've spent so much of human existence in that setting, in that group format, our brains are coded for that, and to perceive being safe in the group as being hugely a matter of survival, hugely important, and being outside of the group of being dangerous and a kind of threat to life. And though I don't think there are any tigers on the business parks near you, nevertheless, we now see group work at work. Work is our new tribal hunter-gatherer tribe. And so we're playing out these tribal dynamics on the hour, in every hour in meetings and so on. And that's why we see nice, bright people, 10 out of 10 people, going to meetings and doing things like being defensive or resisting engaging, or trying to cast their own ideas in the best light, or interrupting people, or dominating, or even just saying nothing when really they should be speaking up. And what we have ultimately failed to do as organizations, we've let this kind of tribal format take over, and we have failed to create any kind of check and balance around how much time people are allowed to spend in meetings, like what is a healthy amount of time to spend your working week in meetings. We've got no filters. So if someone wants to book in your diary, they can absolutely go ahead and do that. We've not been very good at experimenting with new ways of working. And we haven't really developed any new meeting formats. And we haven't role modeled excellence. So if you were to ask people what's, tell me an example of a company that does meetings really, really well, it's hard to think of one. So Joe, I'm going to come to you, and I want you to help us just understand this through the Belbin lens. So I'll flick back one. We've got this understanding that meeting behavior is driven by a survival instinct, and I wonder if you can help us tease that out through Belbin.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way of looking at it. It's interesting to put that Belbin lens on here, isn't it? We often talk about when people come together, there is that sense of us and them sometimes, we like that safety, and we therefore don't recognize differences. We assume that everybody's the same as us very often when we're in these sort of group environment. And from a Belbin perspective, I suppose what we need to do is recognize the differences within the groups, which isn't always overtly done. And we don't adhere to all these things. We fail in so many different ways because we don't say, well, actually, hang on a minute, what is my contribution? What do I need to be doing for this, rather than what's expected, but what's the norm? What do I need to be doing there? So, yeah, very much it's that understanding of that difference, I suppose,
So
within
it's
those
completely
groups.
fascinating that if we that we can, even if we are truly valuable to the group, if we're not perceived as valuable because people don't understand our role versus their role because they perceive each other as the same, that we can still fall into that danger zone of being kind of out of the group. And are there any particular role types that you see being misunderstood or miscast in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends really on the type of group in the first place, which you've already said is very sort of cultural driven as well. There could be different cultural norms in there. But sometimes we find some of those thinking roles, that monitor evaluator, that plant, the specialist, who, because they don't necessarily have that social outgoing way about them, is that you see them very much sort of like, just distancing themselves physically, and not feeling that they can join in what's more of a social role, as the communication, the natural communication that happens. So we very much see different roles engaging or not quite so engaging, or even dominating different meeting spaces.
Yeah, and of course we start to use all those less helpful shadow behaviours when we feel misunderstood, when we feel out of alignment. So one of the things that my framework does is it tries to bring people into alignment, allow people to understand what their specific contribution is, like what their job is to do in that meeting, what behaviours or modes are acceptable, and to create some structure that puts all of that on some guide rails, rather than it just being a complete free-for-all that relies on people's self-awareness and also people kind of having a good day. So I always feel like how successful your meeting is shouldn't it be dependent on whether you had a kind of series of events up to that meeting that meant that you're kind of in a good, positive, helpful, pro-social frame of mind and ready to listen, to operate in useful ways. There should be an element of structure that guides, like the system guides the meeting, irrespective of how any one person is behaving. So I'm going to keep my eye on the comments, but if you had any thoughts on that while I talk through the next stage, then please do drop that in, because it's quite a different way of thinking about it, rather than meetings being kind of personality led, or I often hear people say it needs to be chaired really well. Let's chair it really strongly. And what I'm suggesting is that we create structures and guide rails and norms that that everybody can kind of work within to hold that helpful interaction in place.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes is I'm going to just show you the 5 principles that will help you put meetings on helpful guide rails. Here they are. And for each one, I'm going to show you what it is, how it works, the kind of psychology behind it, and then the simplest way I know to execute it. And you can then take that forward and say, okay, I'm going to use it in these ways, or I'm going to try it in this way. And Obviously, feel free to take notes if that helps you, but not only will you get the slides after this and the recording, but I'm also going to show you where you can sign up to get a cheat sheet with, on one page, everything you need to know for your meeting next week, and how to do all this really well. So if we're going to start anywhere, we have to make space. And most people working in large organizations or in collaborative teams will find that they are spending too much time in meetings. You'll very rarely find somebody who says, I don't go to enough meetings. So before we can think about changing and transforming the meetings we have, we need to make some space. And making space also creates a constraint to help us redesign the meetings that we have. So how most of us spend our time is, so this is not a kind of, don't take this as a literal diagram or graph of how we spend our time, but it's a point of emphasis that in the kind of collaboration comms modalities that we use, meetings tend to be pretty high up, spending a lot of time in meetings, also a lot of time on email, but we're spending relatively little time watching catch-up videos or commenting on documents or using group type chat. Varies for every organization, but actually we're spending more time than we should in the highest intensity collaboration. And what we want to do is flip it. So we want to bring meetings down so that we use that high intensity collaboration modality where everybody has to be there at the same time, just for a smaller proportion of our time, and then we push more of those comms through into these asynchronous channels, catch-up videos, document commenting, group type chat. There are lots of other methods. And of course, the old mindset was, if you need something, need some help, need to make a plan, need to bring people together, call a meeting. But the new mindset is to use these asynchronous modalities first and to create new collaboration norms that reduce the pressure on meetings. And there are a number of organizations now who are async first. So they would flip that entirely. Calling a meeting will be the last thing that they did. So what we don't want to do is put all the meetings in the bin, despite many of the comments I get from people on my social media posts. So here's how to decide. We do need a meeting when there is uncertainty, or where we don't have enough trust, or where we really need to focus people in and be like, this is important, this really matters. So a meeting is a way to kind of shine attention on something that matters. But we do not need a meeting for exchanging information or updating people. Asynchronous tools do a really nice job of that. And we want to flip from pulling information from people in meetings, like, oh, tell me about this, give me an update on that. Pushing information on people in meetings to pulling it. So, okay, I know if I want to find out about this project, I can go here and I'll be able to see a summary of it there. And clearly meetings are not the best format for consulting with a lot of people at once, or for just simply presenting content, rather like we are today. So provided trust is high enough, you don't need a meeting for any of these things here. So the simplest, there are many, many, many different ways to reduce meeting load. And I have a 40-minute e-course on exactly this, and I will share a link at the end with a 100% voucher code. So any of you can go and do that, and there are 13 different ways to reduce meeting load. But the simplest way I know to bring down meeting load is to reduce meeting duration. So we flipped some things to async, those meetings we have left, reduce the duration, and use that as a creative constraint. So I'm just going to show you, so in a moment, I'll show you what to do with a meeting and how to structure it to get the same outcome but faster, without just putting it on fast forward or not going to sufficient depth. But in the meantime, I just want to show you some of these async techniques. So for example, you could shift if you were going to reduce the duration of a meeting, you could shift part of it to an async chat. So for example, rather than calling a meeting to talk all about a decision and start from scratch, you can garner opinion and insights and get people thinking and processing before that meeting in a Teams chat or a whatever kind of group type chat you use. And then when you just use a shorter meeting to talk about what came out of that chat and reduce it to certain decisions and make a decision. Or you could use a weekly async check-in and give people some sentences to complete, like, I've just done this, my next priority is that, my main concerns are that. So it's another way to help people structure their contribution. So I'll leave you to read through some of the other examples afterwards, but I just want to ask you to add your thoughts to the chat. And while people are doing that, Jo, you and I will talk about this out loud. But what might different role types, whether Belbin or other role types, if people use something different, what might different role types need to work well in the asynchronous environment? Jo, I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
It's fun. I did what I said I was going to do. I started writing things down because I suddenly thought, oh gosh, this is really useful because I think what we need to do is think about those behaviours in line with the async way of doing things, don't we? Because I'm immediately, as I'm sure a lot of people who know about Belbin are also thinking, well, that gives that monitor evaluator the time to really think about the correct answer, as opposed to feeling peer pressured by everybody being all around the table at once, still expecting them to come up with the best decision. It helps a specialist to be able just to say everything that they know about a subject without the fear of we've got the screensaver going up of everybody else saying, oh my goodness, what else is there? So I think different parts of the async will work better with some roles than others. And it's a case of, first of all, people understanding themselves and having that self-awareness to know their particular behaviours and which they would best thrive in. It could be that those high team workers, the ones who care, who want to know about the people, who really thrive on that human connection, that weekly chat-in, maybe for them, they need a bit more than that. Maybe they need a daily check-in. And I suppose it's about adapting, isn't it, depending on those individuals involved. Oh, we've got some other people joining us now. That's okay. You can hear some other.
I love this. If we free up time, will Parkinson's law no longer be valid, or will we find other things to do to fill the time up? Yeah, and I think there's quite a train of thought about this on LinkedIn at the moment, which is if you were to create space either for yourself or for deep work, what would you do? People kind of struggling because we're so used to working in a highly saturated, atomized day. It can be very hard to switch modes, and I think we need to learn how to do that.
And I think that's easier said than done. I know that I've personally been told that I need to do more of that. And I find just that physical getting out of the office and walking.
Yeah.
So, and allowing and actually thinking is work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thinking is work. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. But we've completely forgotten that. We feel like typing is work and meetings are work. And that's work. That's my job. But thinking is work. Yes. Yeah. So let's assume that you've managed to bring down meeting load. And most people I work with, I try and help them reduce meeting load by 30%, give or take. I think that is a reasonable assumption for most people. We then need to do something with the time we continue to spend in meetings. So I'm going to let you worry, David, about what we do with the time we're not in meetings anymore. But the time we are in meetings, how are we going to use that really well? So the first thing I'm going to help you think about is how we get people to shift out of deep work through that kind of liminal stage of tidying up tying up one set of brain knots and trying to kind of open ourselves up to the content, context, relationships, dynamics, this new dance we're doing with a group of people. And there they all are. Hello, we're all ready for you in your meeting at 2:00. So what often happens at the start of a meeting is we miss the opportunity to create a really good social contract. And what happens is we end up thrashing that social contract out under the surface throughout the meeting. So by social contract, I mean all the things that in our head we think are agreed between us, like this is okay, this isn't okay, we're going to do this, we're not going to do this, or this is our goal, or whatever it is. So if any of you thought we just need to have an agenda, you were half right, and this is where we tackle that. So we want to get everybody clear before the meeting starts, but we also want to get their defenses down, bring them in open, ready, and like operating in a pro-social way and ready to contribute from minute one. So the old way is, well, just stick it in the diary, put it in the diary, give it some basic name so we know the difference between that one and the one the hour before, and that's it. We might write an agenda, which could be a list of items, but what we really need to do in the new way is brief people to help them make that transition. So the simplest way I know to do this is called the Start Smart 5, and it is a precision invitation. Here it is. So I encourage every organisation I work with, and actually every person, every leader I work with, to develop their version of this. This is my version. You take it, you customise it for your specific meetings and your specific groups. But the idea is, if you want to take up people's time, use that precious resource, you're going to tell people 5 things before they come. I'm going to tell them what the overall goal is. We will do this thing together. I'm going to give them a specific job to do. Please, would you make this contribution? I'm going to give them some questions to answer. We're going to specify anything we will do and anything we won't do, so kind of scope it out. I find this a very useful tool. We will do this, but we won't do that. And then ask them to come ready to, which is the prep and the social norms. Like, I want you to come ready to challenge on XYZ, or share your thoughts on ABC in a supportive way. So we're really gearing them up with a clear briefing. And again, in many organisations I work with, I will persuade them to make this a minimum entry requirement. So if you're going to book people's time from today, that's the minimum that you need to give people. You don't need to do all of that on the day you book it. You don't need to decide all of that yourself. There might be part of it you scope out, and part of it you ask the group to help you decide, but it's agreed before the meeting. And then at the start of the session, you replay that again. So rather than wasting that prime real estate where you're opening the container of the session, again, you play back, this is what we're going to, here's the big picture, here's what we're trying to do today, this is the job I want you to do in this room today, this is what the kind of behaviour that's really helpful, and this is what we're not going to do today. So if you want a particular type of behaviour, you can absolutely name that at the start of the session. So again, just drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think different role types might most appreciate a briefing on, or you might believe is most helpful for that particular role type? What would help them and kind of unleash them in a good way? And Jo, the question for you while people are thinking.
No, I think that's a great question. And I think one of the things for me would say is brief people to know which hat they're wearing. Because we can all play many different roles, and we're remembering that we're not playing these roles just because we can, but because they are needed for the team to progress. So for me, it would be a case of, Jo, please can you play your shaper role? Your coordinator, resource investigator is not required. So I think it's really making that quite clear. And I think all of the roles, you need that briefing, but it's being given permission to play that role during that meeting or not. No plant suggestions allowed. I actually already say that quite frequently when it needs to be quite focused and we don't want to go out there. So I think that's quite a key one.
Perfect. So that tees us up nicely to think about, what are we going to do in the session itself? So how can we design a session that will allow people with different styles and different role types and different profiles to contribute really well? And we call this structure for flow. So the problem we have is this meeting bias cascade. This is one pattern that we see in meetings. So for example, let me talk you through this waterfall that we get. So start a meeting. Okay, who's going to kick off? Somebody who feels really comfortable saying the first thing they think of out loud availability bias, speaks first, and that sets the tone for all the other contributions that come after it. So anchoring bias. We then warm to people who kind of sound like us, affinity bias, and we tune into what supports this kind of emerging view, and we conveniently miss anything that doesn't support it, confirmation bias. And then status quo bias keeps the group comfortable, so it's better to stick with a familiar plan than to risk being the one who suggests something new. Meanwhile, fundamental attribution error makes us assume that that quiet person is disengaged rather than thinking, and that the challenger is being awkward rather than helpful. And then a senior person speaks, and authority bias ensures that their opinion instantly feels more sensible than it might actually be. And by the end, recency bias does the final tidy up, turning the last kind of confident statement into the decision. So not every meeting goes like this, but what you can see is that, I think exactly as you mentioned, Suki, that there are plenty of people who feel perfectly comfortable saying the first thing that comes into their head, and they are people who often speak to think. So saying something out loud allows them to process, speak. And the problem is that anchors this cascade of bias through the whole session. So Jo, for just one moment, do you want to reflect on this with a Belbin hat, and then I'll show you how to tackle it?
I've just put in the comments, this looks so familiar. I'm smiling as we're going through, because we can see that resource investigator shaper setting the scene for everything, the monitor evaluator not wanting or feeling that they can say anything to contradict, the team workers trying to keep everybody happy. We see this on a regular basis. This is something that is very, very familiar. So I think anything that you can suggest to help us deal with that would be really gratefully received.
So the old way is just talk. So, and meetings are essentially a kind of improv, aren't they? So, and there are some role types and personality types and neurotypes who find that comes really naturally to them, and meetings suit them really well. But for those who don't, we need to use scaffolding. So these are kind of fairly light, shouldn't be too clunky, it's not like a big workshop, but just obviously helpful techniques that mean that a much broader range of people can contribute in their more natural style and way. And I love, John, you've said like encouraging people to release their inner plant. It's exactly that. It's helping people understand what thing is required of them and give a format and a structure that it makes it really easy to do that. So there are loads of these, but I'm going to give you one that's probably more simple than any of the other ones you've ever used, and that is using meeting questions. So you simply break the session into questions. Humans are problem-solving, question-answering machines. So rather than just listing content for the meeting, give it a series of questions to ask. And I'm going to show you now why that works. So imagine it's a meeting that is, we'll call it a catalyst meeting. It's trying to solve a problem or start something new, like it's an out of the ordinary meeting. Rather than just having a big discussion about, should we do this, should we do that? Well, we tried that before. Oh, hang on, I don't think we've understood the problem. Rather than having that kind of crosstalk, instead we break it out into 4 questions. First, we all answer the first one together. What is the problem? How can we better expose the truth of the problem? Then we're going to talk about our options. Okay, now we're on this track. We're going to talk about options. Then we're going to talk about criteria. And finally, we're going to evaluate what we think is the best option for us. So this is a super, super simple way. We give you another one because there are many meetings that are not like, here's one problem, then let's solve it together in this meeting. We've got cadence meetings, trying to kind of bring teams together, align people around work, unblock things. So this is how you might use questions to structure a cadence meeting. So first question, how's everyone doing? Like that's what we want to know, first of all, like, how are we? Second question, what's blocked? Third is what's concerning you. And fourth is what can we improve today? So again, just giving a light structure. So my top tip to avoid that cascade, that bias cascade, is to make the first question right at the start of the meeting and something everyone can answer very quickly in turn. So that is another structure called around. And what that means is, rather than the first person who has got something to say, speaking up and setting the tone for the rest of the meeting and setting the kind of conversation patterns, we set the pattern from the very start that we are all going to speak and listen equally. So that question could be something very work specific, like what's your priority in this meeting today, or it could be something a bit lighter, like what's your workload temperature like at the moment, or, you know, I've seen plenty of Cambridgey questions, how many miles have you cycled on your bike this week, etc. But you pick a question that you feel is going to set the right tone and help you the most. And of course, there are loads of other scaffolds. So feel free to drop other scaffolds into the chat that you think people might find useful. And I'm just going to share a few here. So we've got rounds, brainwriting, just giving people a few minutes to think and make notes on their own before they have to share it with the group. Got emoji voting or dot voting. So I can see people have thumbsed up some of the comments here. That is emoji voting. Check in and check out. You could use constructive rant. You could use parallel writing, 1, 2, 4, all, which is a liberating structure. I'm sure plenty of you know many liberating structures. So again, drop in the comments, how do you think meeting questions or other structures that you like might help different role types? How do you see that playing out through the Belbin lens? And Jo, tell us.
Can I ask a question? Would you put some of those questions, you know, that first question, in with that Smart 5? So
yes,
prepping people beforehand, so that helps that first person just shouting out. Would you brief it a little bit?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
they're in that. You don't have to put questions in the Smart 5, but
No.
to me, so I'm trying to create the fewest tools possible. So you're not doing
Yeah.
something over here and then you have to do something over
Yeah.
there. And yes, questions go in the Smart 5. Yeah.
Because I think that again helps with different behaviors. Some people like the structure,
Yes.
don't they? And some people like to feel that that their voices have been heard, but then that's okay. So including them to start with is a great one for those sort of resource investigator, perhaps the coordinator, the team workers. And also I quite like the meeting questions. It gives structure to those team roles, that like the implementer who likes to know what the process is going to be. So I think having that would help each of them in their own way.
Absolutely. And if you can see the list of questions, you know the thing you're concerned about is going to be addressed by the group. So you're more willing to listen and to contribute in the mode that is requested of you at that moment. So all this is fine. You've reduced your meeting load. You have briefed people really clearly, so they've arrived, they're clear, their defence is down. You've got these great structures, so suddenly you can achieve in half an hour what might have taken an hour of kind of free flow. And all that would be completely fine if all our meetings were populated by robots. But the truth is, there were no robots, unfortunately. We've got real people, and real people don't do the prep we ask them to do. They don't behave in the predictable way we thought they would when presented with a certain structure. They do something completely different from what they did last time, and we need to handle that. So the fourth principle for every meeting for the collaboration era is to create a strong space. We talk a lot about psychological safety. I think that's a word that's been massively overused and somewhat misunderstood. So my phrasing for this is to make a psychologically strong space. And that in a strong space, the team expects and encourages and handles conflict really, really well. And it's constantly trying to widen and deepen the range of helpful interactions that the group can comfortably have. Whereas I think the risk with a psychologically safe space is we're almost trying to contract it. Can be the misunderstanding. We're trying to kind of contract down to what the maximum we think any one person in the group can handle. Strong space is the opposite. We are trying to develop this team muscle to safely handle uncertainty, complexity, conflict. And meetings are a really important place to cultivate this. So again, this is a whole 6-week program in its own right. I'm going to tell you old way, new way, the simplest tool I know. So the old way is the same few people speak up, people dominate, they're not challenged. And basically, whatever the sort of interpersonal dynamics are, they just play out. The new way is to develop this strong space. So the simplest tool I know is to use a strong space statement to agree what's needed and to set the kind of ground rules for that session. And then you're going to use your generous authority to hold those boundaries. So a strong space statement, let's give you some examples. We've got, in that catalyst meeting, we might say, it might be a session where there's a problem that's been rumbling on for a long time, no one can agree on the answer, we're not making any progress. So we'd say, in this session, we need to find a solution. So I would like you to frame critiques as how might we questions. So it's really directive. It's saying, it's really kind of unleashing people to do the thing you need them to do. Or in another meeting, you might say, today it's important we hear from everyone, even if that contribution is inconvenient or it's problematic. Like, we welcome every single contribution. And of course, it isn't enough to just say those words, but saying them at the start out loud. You don't need to call it a safety statement or a strong space statement or anything like that. You just state it. But what it does is it allows people to moderate themselves, and they'll also moderate each other as well. And you can come back to this and say, today, we did say it was important to hear from everyone. So even if your contribution is inconvenient, I want you to stop interrupting. I want to hear this person's point because we said we'd hear all contributions. So it gives you a kind of rule of thumb to refer back to. Now, there are a number of other techniques that you can use, but very specific meeting techniques. The second one is to give people time to process and a choice of response format. So as we know, some people like to speak up in meetings and they speak to think, but a lot of people think to speak, and they feel quite unsafe and much less willing to disagree or say something important but potentially problematic if they haven't had enough time to think about it in advance, or if they have to kind of break into the conversation. So a real basic of creating a strong space is to give people time to process. So we talked about using async beforehand to start to surface things, give people a chance to respond there, or giving people some brainwriting time. So sharing a question, saying, take 3 minutes to jot down some notes or talk to one other person, pair up. And you can give people a choice of response format as well. So rather than just expecting people to break into the live conversation, you could say, a bit like I'm doing now, please add things to the chat, or we're going to spend 5 minutes populating a Miro board, or you can fill in something afterwards, but giving people who prefer to think and type, some options. And then finally, this thing of encouraging people to step forward and step back. And that might be you as the meeting leader or your client as the meeting leader. So, Jo, we talked quite a lot before this about the self-awareness you need to lead meetings very well. And I encourage people to specifically, at the start of the meeting, to invite people to step forward or step back. So I would sometimes say, at the start of a meeting, if you're somebody who naturally is happy talking in this kind of environment and you know that you have plenty to say, then today I'm going to ask you to take a step back. And if you're somebody who doesn't normally speak up, today I'm going to ask you to take a step forward. And I've already set the tone, and I've kind of keyed in certain people without saying their name. Okay, so very quick chat about this. What would you want to put in a safety statement or a strong space statement? Jo, can you give us
Yeah,
one?
well, this is where the language of Belbin really comes into its own, because instead of making it personal, you can use the language of Belbin and give permission for each of those behaviours to come forward, give them permission for the team workers to be able to say what they want to say, which they may otherwise feel, that they can't do that. They don't have the confidence maybe, or don't want to upset anybody within the meeting. So we always talk about having those conversations within the team, so that we can say things like, right, can you stop being so complete a finisher, or can you be more complete a finisher? Can we hear from thee? And resource investigators, just please be quiet. So I think this adds beautifully into that overlap with using that Belbin language within this structure that you're describing here.
And that is perfect. And we're always trying to third party it. We're trying to hold the system to account, not to, it's very easy to kind of demonize or lionize particular types, like you're always talking in meetings that is about, morally bad. It's not morally bad. It's their natural instinct. It's our job to create a container for that, and for people to not feel that they are to blame in any way for speaking too much or speaking too little. So finally, assuming we've done all this, we now need to capture the value of that. We can have the best session in the world, but often what happens is everyone just leaves with their own notes. And over time, we've all got different understandings. Oh, I didn't realize we were doing that. Oh, I thought we would say that. I do that all the time. So the new way is to create precision co-created notes and then share them transparently afterwards. And the most simple tool I know to do this is my Smart Capture. So 4 scannable boxes, which makes every meeting kind of parsable. So during the meeting, you'd have this up somewhere. Could be in the chat, could be on a whiteboard, live or digital, whatever. And you're constantly adding to it. Was that a decision? Okay, let's capture that. Is there an action with that? Brilliant, let's capture that. And heads up is things like, don't forget, we've got clients coming into the office next week, or there's something, it's dependencies, things that we want to kind of remember, but they're not really a decision or an action. And then we've got a car park. So for people who really want to talk about things that are out of scope, in they go. You can point at it in the session and say, that's on the list for exploring a different day. So again, in the comments, I'd love to know what you think of using this shared co-created set of notes to help people with different team role types make more progress together. So question for the comments, and Jo, do you want to think aloud with us?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of organised note taking, to me, I feel quite anxious. I know some people do it a lot better than I do, but that means that the responsibility is more on others. So I think it's about understanding how each person should be contributing towards a capture, because otherwise I feel it will be left to those team workers, the implementers, maybe the coordinators to complete this. So I think that, again, that goes back to what you were saying before about that social contract and practicing and practicing and practicing, because it's not going to be right the first time. And to try and get those roles that don't like to adhere to structure, they need to see the benefit of it, don't they? So it's a case of practicing as we go with that. And maybe, I mean, Kimberly's made a point about different team members rotating, and Meredith always used to say, rotate the chair depending on what is needed within the meeting. Don't make it always dependent on one person. Maybe you could also apply this to the Smart Capture.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to draw. That's a great suggestion.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I saw Kimberly's note, and I thought that perfectly lends itself to that, to give shared. What we're always trying to do is share the responsibility. So break out of that kind of industrial era, hierarchical, this is my bit, that's your bit, I tell you what to do, or that kind of directive approach, and into a shared responsibility. And one of the ways you cultivate that is by sharing out the jobs that need to be done, but that come more naturally to some people than to others. So beautifully described there. So we've got 5 or 10 minutes for questions. I just want you to take a deep breath in, feet on the ground, deep breath out, because there's quite a lot here, isn't there? And I just want you to remember this. Meetings are a theatre for culture and leadership. They are where we experience the organisation. They are where we experience the culture. They're where we find out what matters, who matters, and what is acceptable and what isn't. And they're where people experience you as a leader, and they are where people experience your clients if you're working with people as a leader. So they are worthy of much more self-awareness, much better design, and those light, helpful structures that keep pro-social behaviours on helpful guardrails. So we're not trying to overly constrain, and I'd always say just enough structure to create flow. So I'm just going to put this back on the screen again. These are the 5 principles we shared: making space for deep work, briefing people with the Start Smart 5, just enough structure for flow, creating that strong space to allow for the imperfect, messy human communication, which we'll inevitably receive, and then capturing and extracting the value and taking that back into the real world. So I just want to know in the comments, what idea has stood out for you today as interesting, useful, important? What is the thing that has really jumped out at you today? And I'd love to see the range. And while you're typing, Jo, I'm going to pose that question to you.
All of it. I think there is so much, isn't there? And perhaps with small tweaks in each area, we can start to make that difference to our meetings. Me personally, is that mindset between that diary, that first diary of meeting, but how do we actually create the value that the organization, the teams need by that deep space? So really consciously thinking about that when diarising things, when just saying we need a meeting, do we? And looking at those async ways of doing things, I'm going to really think about that, because I think I could probably save us all a lot of time here in the Belbin office. And I know there's people here on the chat who I work with, and they're going, yes, Jo, there's a lot we can do. Greg's agreeing actually with that, creating space for deep thinking outside of the meeting onslaught. Greg, it is a meeting onslaught, isn't it?
I've heard it called a meeting tsunami.
Yeah. Yes.
Or a kind of, you open your laptop. Somebody said, I open my laptop in the morning, because I work on meetings, but also all the kind of asynchronous collaboration formats. I open my laptop in the morning and a sort of tsunami of meetings and comms comes towards me. And I felt that was very, very resonant. So I want to leave space for at least a couple of questions. So if anybody needs to shoot off, don't leave before signing up for this. So tomorrow, I'm in my friction-free email, which I do every single week, and I basically give away everything I know in very granular detail every Thursday. And tomorrow's is my 2025 cheat sheet. So everything we've talked about today will go on a one page, all the templates, checklists, etc. Everything you need to think about and do as just a reference on one page. So as long as you sign up for and confirm your email before 12:30 tomorrow, you will get that. That link, we'll pop that link in the chat.
It's in there.
Oh, perfect. And then it will also go in the email that is coming out later. So if it's okay with you, Jo, should we open the floor to a couple of questions for anybody who's got something specific, or like a yes, but?
Absolutely. I'm just going through it because people have really zoned in on the bits that they are going to find most useful, Carrie. This is a wonderful reflection of the last 45 minutes, is that people are finding bits to use. And of course, if they sign up to your newsletter, they'll be able to have all of that and more tomorrow. I think one question that came up earlier is, everybody's different. We use the Belbin terminology for this. And for me, the meetings are changing the way you do things, the changing the process is easier for some team roles than others. Do you have any advice for those plant shaper, resource investigator, the high energy ideas don't adhere to anything, waltz in, waltz out, chaos around them? How can you help them adopt a different type of working to what they're used to in this more sort of process way, more structured way?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the hardest nuts to crack, because there's a whole kind of slew of people for whom how meetings are right now works really well. I just show up, I just say what I think, I leave. We all know how to contribute to meetings, don't we? So I think okay, a couple of things. Firstly, all of this is about developing self-awareness. So I love that Pairing with Belbin helps you to tap into the self-awareness that they're already developing. So that's absolutely perfect. The second thing is, I don't know about you, but I can't get anyone to do a course on running meetings. No one wants to do it. What they want to do is they want to solve problems they already care about. So what we need to understand from them is what they care about. So I think I'm a plant.
Yeah.
Or I think I came out as like an architect or something when I did the sort of more, complex one. And honestly, don't ask a plant to do a PhD. It's not. It's a very difficult thing to do as a plant. But what I would find is, I find it super frustrating when I'd have all these ideas, or I'd have all these ways of things to contribute, and they wouldn't get used. People wouldn't do my ideas. So what I would connect with is how can I land my ideas, or how can I shape my, or how can I dot 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 dot. And that was quite a journey of discovery, really. So almost all the work I do with organizations is trying to tap into personas and problems that they care about solving. Yeah. And the second thing, the final part to that is I think it can be helpful to develop team agreements. So a really nice tool is how I meet best, or how I collaborate best. So asking people to complete 5 sentences around, my idea of a nightmare is in a meeting is dot dot dot, or get me on my best at this time of day, or if you want me to contribute really well, what really helps me is this. So a bit of a kind of team sharing agreement specifically about meetings and collaboration. And then you can use that to develop some team norms, and ultimately you can make a team agreement, so that it's not, we move from being like, I need to fix myself, or I need to fix that person over there, to what is the way in which we work really well as a thoughtful team together, knowing that none of us get our preferences met all the time, but that all of us have signed up to something that we know ultimately serves the goal of the team and the work we're all trying to do together. So that's where I would take that.
Thank you.
13:59. One more question?
No, that was fantastic. I think what you've said there is because we talk about team contracts and social contracts, and I know Gary Sheeran from Legal and John has thing all about me. He encourages people to write down what's important to me, but we need it through that lens of meetings, don't we? We need to not be so general, perhaps. And so what's important to me? What do I care about the most throughout this meeting, or when we're, what are the outcomes that we need? To have those discussions. I think we need to talk more, don't we, and share. And we can use that framework of Belbin to be able to really explain why it's different.
Yeah, 100%.
Why what I need is
There's
different to what
language
you
for it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's so powerful.
Yes, and you reminded me a lot of Meredith there. All these ideas, Jo, why aren't you doing anything with them? I'm like, for crying out loud. So thank you for that. We have reached the hour. We've talked about meetings. We've talked about how they are, the way that we meet together is so embedded in how we were as hunter-gatherers, and how we're still following the same tired, doesn't work structure and ways of doing things that are causing us to spend far too much time and really not being that productive. Carrie, you've given us that wonderful 5-step process, 5 ways that we can look at meetings differently to try and get some of that time back, to try and get some of also that joy of working back, because I think that's linked to meetings, isn't it? So I would really encourage everybody to sign up to the newsletter. The link will also be in the email that we send out this afternoon. So get that, and you will have all of Carrie's wisdom from the meetings expert on how you can start loving meetings that little bit more. So Carrie, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. It has been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Tim. There'll be a wonderful welcome, the very thoughtful dialogue, and the fantastic builds in the comments. Wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much. So everybody, we will be having another webinar next year. I'll send out some details of the next ones very shortly, but thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Thank you.